Could an HOA actually burn down your property just because they don't like how it looks? That's exactly what happened to me last summer when a power-hungry board member decided my storage shed had to go, and I mean literally go up in flames. What she didn't count on was that my son happens to be one of the best property rights attorneys in the state. Stick around, because this story of revenge is one you won't believe. If you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Drop a comment below about your own HOA experiences. I read every single one, and they helped me decide which stories to tell next. I'm Frank, and I've lived in the lakeside retirement community for 15 peaceful years. When my wife and I first moved here, it was paradise. Neighbors waved as you drove by, we had monthly potlucks by the lake, and everyone respected each other's property. The HOA existed, sure, but they mostly handled common area maintenance and organized community events. That all changed about 3 years ago when Karen Thompson moved in and somehow got herself elected to the HOA board. Within months, the friendly atmosphere evaporated. Suddenly, there were new restrictions on everything. What color you could paint your front door, how high your grass could be, even what kind of flowers you could plant. My trouble started when Karen sent me a violation notice about my storage shed. It was a simple 8-10 structure I'd built myself 10 years ago, perfectly functional and tucked away in the corner of my backyard. I used it to store my fishing gear, lawn equipment, and woodworking tools. Mr. Henderson, the notice read, your storage shed violates community aesthetic standards. You have 30 days to remove it or face fines of $100 per day. I couldn't believe it. This shed had been there longer than Karen had lived in the community, and no one had ever complained before. I went to the next HOA meeting to appeal, but Karen shut me down immediately. The rules are the rules, Frank, she said with that condescending smile that makes my blood boil. Your shed doesn't match the approved architectural elements in our community. What approved elements? I asked. It's a shed, not the Taj Mahal. The board meeting was a joke. Karen had clearly stacked the deck with her allies, and my appeal was denied before I even finished speaking. I left frustrated, but determined to fight this. You wouldn't believe what they did next. Just 3 days after the meeting, I came home to find a lien placed on my property for $3,000 in accumulated fines. They were fining me $100 a day dating back to when they claimed they first sent a notice I never received. I called my son David that night. He's always been level-headed, and I knew he'd give me good advice. Dad, this sounds like harassment, he said. I can look over the HOA bylaws if you want. But honestly, these small-time tyrants usually back down when someone stands up to them. David's a busy lawyer at a big firm downtown, specializing in property rights. He offered to write a letter to the HOA, but I decided to try handling it myself first. After all, I'd spent 20 years in the army dealing with bureaucracy. How bad could this be? Bad. Very bad. The next week, I received another notice, this time demanding the shed's removal within 7 days, or they would take appropriate action to remedy the violation. I called the HOA office to clarify what that meant, but Karen refused to speak with me directly. I was getting worried, but still hopeful that common sense would prevail. Then came the false hope. A neighbor told me that some board members were getting tired of Karen's heavy-handed approach and might be willing to compromise. I reached out to one of them, who suggested I paint the shed to match my house and add some decorative elements to make it more aesthetically pleasing. I spent the entire weekend painting and adding window boxes with flowers. It actually looked pretty nice when I was done. I sent pictures to the HOA and waited for their response. If this HOA sounds unbelievable already, make sure to hit subscribe. You don't want to miss how this ends. 3 days later, I came home from fishing at the lake to find my backyard filled with smoke. My shed was engulfed in flames, and standing there watching it burn with a satisfied smirk on her face was none other than Karen Thompson herself. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, running toward my property. "Removing the violation, Frank," she said calmly. "The board authorized me to take whatever means necessary to bring your property into compliance." I was speechless. Not only had they destroyed my property, but they'd done it while I was away and without any notice. I immediately called 911, then David. The fire department arrived quickly, but by then the shed was a total loss. Everything inside, my grandfather's old fishing tackle, the woodworking tools I'd inherited from my father. My lawn equipment was destroyed. When the police arrived, Karen tried to spin her story, claiming the shed was an imminent danger and that she had board authorization to remove it. The officer took statements but seemed skeptical. David arrived about an hour later, dressed in his suit and carrying his briefcase. The sight of my 6'2" son towering over Karen was something I'll never forget. "I'm David Henderson," he said, extending his hand to Karen, who refused to shake it. "I understand you authorized the destruction of my father's property." "The board made a collective decision," Karen said, her voice faltering slightly. "Then you won't mind providing documentation of that decision, including the meeting minutes where it was discussed and voted on?" David asked, taking out a notepad. Karen's face went pale. I don't have that with me right now." David smiled thinly. "That's what I thought. You see, Karen, I happen to specialize in property rights and HOA law. And what you've done today isn't just against your own bylaws, it's criminal. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal activity." David filed a police report, a civil lawsuit against the HOA and Karen personally, and a complaint with the state's HOA Oversight Board. He also requested all HOA records, including meeting minutes, financial statements, and communications. What we discovered was shocking. Karen had been using HOA funds for personal expenses, manipulating board meetings to push through her agenda, and selectively enforcing rules against residents she personally disliked. She'd even created fake violation notices and backdated them to justify fines. The best part: the shed wasn't even in violation of the HOA's rules. Karen had simply decided she didn't like it and made up the aesthetic standards violation out of thin air. David subpoenaed security footage from neighbors' homes, which showed Karen and a few accomplices setting fire to my shed. They'd used some kind of accelerant to make sure it burned completely. The criminal case moved quickly. Karen was arrested for arson, destruction of property, and fraud. Several other board members resigned when their involvement came to light. In civil court, the HOA's insurance ended up paying me $75,000 for the shed and its contents, plus emotional distress and legal fees. Karen was personally ordered to pay another $25,000 in punitive damages. But the sweetest revenge came during the special HOA meeting called to elect new board members. I decided to run myself, and with the support of neighbors who'd also been targeted by Karen's regime, I was elected president of the HOA board. My first act as president was to propose new bylaws that limited the board's power, created a fair appeals process for violations, and required majority votes for any enforcement actions over 100. The new board passed them unanimously. We also established a community fund to help residents who couldn't afford to make required repairs to their properties, something Karen would have hated. Karen eventually pleaded guilty to avoid a trial. She got probation, community service, and was ordered to take anger management classes. She also had to write a personal letter of apology to every resident she'd harassed during her time on the board. I still have that letter. It's framed and hanging in my new shed, bigger and better than the old one, built with some of the settlement money and a lot of help from neighbors who came together to show their support. Looking back, I'm almost grateful for what Karen did. Her abuse of power brought our community closer together. We now have monthly potlucks again. Neighbors help each other with property maintenance, and everyone keeps an eye out for any sign of the kind of tyranny that Karen brought to our neighborhood. The experience taught me that standing up to bullies is worth it, even when it seems hopeless. And having a lawyer for a son doesn't hurt either. What's the craziest HOA story you've experienced or heard about? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about everyday people standing up to injustice and getting the justice they deserve. Until next time, remember, know your rights, stand your ground, and never let anyone push you around on your own property.